Okay, we're recording now, and welcome to, this is a second session of Conversations and Miracles, and I can do a little bit of an overview of what we covered last week, and I'll just bring up the poster of that. I should have had this prepared, of course, but it won't take a second. If you can see the share screen. Not yet?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so that's just a little poster, and I've used a big I in there. Open your eyes and be the change you wish to see. It's all about seeing, isn't it? And from the disappearance of the universe information, it's about a course in cause and not effect. You know, if we're only treating the effect, then we're not getting down to the underlying cause of what's going on. And the Conversation with God material tells us that when we manifest our reality, it's always the thought behind the thought behind the thought which does the manifestation. Right. So in other words, you might think you're creating from your superficial consciousness, but it's actually your deeper consciousness which is actually doing the creating. And we might have covered that on one of the items last week. Now I'll close that one down, and I'll bring up some of the study material. I'm going to share this one as well. Now, the first session for the Conversations and Miracles is on our YouTube site, and I did send it around on our last email that people can watch that if they wish. And it was consisting of two major items. One was the disappearance of the universe, which is an offshoot from the Course in Miracles. And in the top window, I'll just make that a little bit bigger. That's chapter 1. Just some of the very powerful statements out of chapter 1. And I'll just review it just quickly to give you a basis of where that's coming from. On page 9, we're informed that God did not create duality, and he did not create the world. If he did, he would be author of a tale told by an idiot. I don't necessarily agree with that. However, it's quite a statement, isn't it? And it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways. And it says on the next one, your unconscious mind, which you are completely oblivious to, or else it wouldn't be unconscious, is under the domination of a sick thought system that is shared on both a collective and individual level by everyone who comes to the false universe, or else they wouldn't come here in the first place. Right? So you can see just from those first two statements that disappearance puts quite a negative connotation to our existence in this realm. And in a lot of ways, it's for good reason. I mean, it's a pretty awful place to come sometimes. And even the rest of the chapter on page 17, it talks about it's all a trick. That your perception, something you value very highly, is simply lying to you. Your unconscious thought system, it's so seemingly despicable, you'd run away from it if you could really examine it. And that's probably perfectly valid, perfectly true. And it talks about failure, accidents, addictions, natural disasters, the real cause of all violence, crime and war. What a horrible place to be. for the rest of chapter 1, truth is not of this universe. Yeah, I go along with that. And then it finishes chapter 1 with, you don't need us to help you feel good about a universe that was never worth the price of admission and never will be. So it's kind of got a very negative connotation on our existence here. But that is contrasted quite strongly, I find, with the conversations with God material. And chapter 1 is quite different. It doesn't really put a negative connotation on our existence, but it comes to similar conclusions in some ways. You know, it tells us that the abuse that we are subjected to is not acceptable, and we need to stand up and say that that's not acceptable and needs to stop. We can't just be airy-fairy about it and say, well, I'll just connect to my guides and everything will be all right. It doesn't quite work that way. But it does go into quite a different perspective of why we're here. And instead of being a mistake, which is what the disappearance of the universe says it is, it's actually an adventure that we've chosen to take from a higher realm. And it's the adventure of a lifetime. You know, you can have a lot of fun shutting down your natural God-given qualities, let's call them, and just come into this realm without any of those abilities at all. And the reason you're doing that is a little bit like, you know, say you've got an exam that you've got to sit. If you were given all the answers to that exam before you went in, you wouldn't bother to learn the stuff, right? You just go in there and answer all the questions. You can get 100% or whatever it's going to be, but you won't have the experience behind you, right? And so when you're out in the real world, post-exam, you'll have no background that you can refer to. And it's kind of similar to the way Conversations with God describes it. We deliberately go through amnesia so that we can have the experience, not just the concept of knowing who we are. In the meantime, it can be a pretty bloody awful place to be, but that's all part of the challenge. And if we're able to stay in touch with our higher self, the energy that inspires us and sending us information all the time, then the suffering is not required. Right? We can come through on that. Just finishing what we covered last week on Conversation with God, book number 1. On point 12, which I'm highlighting here, it says, faith moves mountains. The sponsoring thought behind the thought becomes your reality. The request itself is not necessary. And what that's talking about, it's actually in the previous statement, you don't have to ask for things in this incarnation. If you know who you are, you know that you can command them into place, right? The only effective prayer is one of gratitude. If you go into a prayer saying, oh, please give me this, please give me that, that's the begging element, and it never manifests because you're actually pushing it away. What you're doing is you're using your God-given power to say, I don't have this, and the universe responds. It gives you the experience of wanting instead of having. So it's a very profound change of thinking in order to bring about faith where we can move mountains. Right? The next one says God is the observer, not creator. God created us and we create the rest in the image and likeness and power of God with free choice. Right? So if there is something that we call God, it's just observing us. It doesn't make our decisions for us. In fact, we were given free choice to do as we please, and that is the ultimate desire of this thing that we call God. And God will tell you in this material that it doesn't exist anyway. What God might be is a manifestation of everything. In other words, everything seen and everything unseen is the complete description of God. It's all that is, right? It's within us. It's within a rock or anything inanimate and animate. It's total and complete, right? It's not a person, or we don't need to personify it as many religions do. It's not out there. It's within us, and we need to acknowledge that. And it says, page 13, God does not care what we do because the outcome is assured. The outcome of life is in doubt, creates fear, and is an illusion. What that's saying is, if we have the idea that we can fail, ultimately fail, then that can set up fear within us, right? But what the teachings show us is that the outcome is assured. We will all get there, right? It might take several lifetimes, or it might take hundreds of lifetimes, or even more. But that's part of the journey. We're evolving from a young soul to an older soul, and we can get off the reincarnation merry-go-round through enlightenment, right? But opposed to the disappearance material, we are here by choice, and we're very happy to be here because we want to have the experience of who we are as creators, not just the concept, right? Because when you're in the absolute, you can only know yourself as a concept. You can't actually experience it. In order to experience, you have to have duality, right? If you want to experience yourself as the creator, then you deliberately forget your true nature as someone that cannot possibly create. But as you evolve, you discover that you have got the power of creation within you. That's the whole idea of our existence. Then it says, devil is mythology. Explanations of divinity, joy, and ecstasy encounter jealousy, anger, rage, and after they kill you, they call you a saint and love you for staying at peace while they killed you. That's a bit of a strange sentence. What it's trying to say there is, let's say you're very close to fully awakening, and what you do is you go out to the wider world and provide explanations that you are divine, that it's a joyful thing to be here, and it's ecstatic as well, right? What you're trying to do is get a message across to people to say to them, you are divine, and you are the highest authority in your life. There's no one above you. uh, because you've chosen to be here as an aspect of divinity in order to demonstrate that. And if you give people that truth, encapsulated truth, they get angry at you because it shatters their own worldview. You know, they might be of a particular religion which doesn't look at it that way. And that's the problem with religion. Religion tells you how to think, whereas spirituality inspires you to think. You know, there is a place for religions. It's very useful to have something that you can identify with. But in general, if the God figure is outside of yourself, we're actually disempowering ourselves. Right? We need to bring the God element back within us. The spirit is within, and you could even say that the God doesn't even come into it, because we are God already. And if you're bringing that truth at a very high level, you might end up getting crucified. And then when they realize how much at peace you were while you were going through that process, then they call you a saint. You know, so it's kind of bipolar. You know, first they kill you, and then they praise you and worship you and all that. Interestingly, those sort of avatars are not here to be worshipped. All they're doing is shining a light for others to follow. They do not need to be worshipped because we are all divine, and we could say we're all equal in the eyes of God. Yeah, some of us are not so as evolved as others. There's young souls and old souls. Anyway, yeah, so going on to the next statement, it talks about thought. You know, people have asked me, well, if I'm creating my own reality, well, how come I'm getting locked down, or I'm getting these nasty things happening to me when I don't want them? And the answer is simply that it's your deeper sponsoring thought which is actually creating your reality, not your superficial thought, right? And so it's very useful to become aware of that element within us, that we've got a superficial thought process, which might be reactive and responds to certain criteria, but we've also got a very deep core belief system, which is actually what is creating our reality. And we can affect the way we those inner thoughts. We can change those, but it's a little bit like you can do it directly through hypnotic processes, but you've got to be very careful. That's why a hypnotist is properly trained, right? Because if you start using that as a party trick, you can do a lot of damage to the psyche of someone who's being hypnotized. I'm sure Chris agrees with that.
I was about to chime in and say, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's pretty damn serious stuff. If you're playing with the core belief system of someone, you can do that. You can do that someone incredible damage.
Yeah. Now, the underlying, the first value is do no harm. It's the same as the medical one. It's just do no harm. Make sure that everything you do has an inherent ecology with it before you make any proposed changes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's probably why both sides of the Iron Curtain, which I think has been taken down, or so we've heard, have got their psychic experiments where they're trying to control reality through those psychic experiments. And it's not only remote viewing that they do, but it's also remote interference, and that's pretty deadly stuff. I've come across material where they're doing remote interference, and that could cause a lot of karma, let's say.
Yeah.
Massive karma. But what they can do now is they can literally take one person, elicit a state in that person, and broadcast it to an area.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you want to do fear in a particular suburb, what you do is you take one person and you amplify it.
Okay.
And they can do that now via, well, phone systems and mobile towers and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So if you're feeling like you're on a bit of a roller coaster, just check that other people in your area aren't noticing the same.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. It's also used for the greater good as well. Overwhelmingly.
And it can be.
Yeah. So
that's the irony of it, that the system of control uses the digital method for that, and the enlightened beings use a very much more analog, more powerful, so a morphogenetic field.
Okay, yeah. And see, the knowledge of, just that knowledge that we've just covered in the last few minutes is not in the consciousness of a lot of the population. And that's one of the reasons why we're having all these troubles.
That's true.
Right? Yeah, and the awakening process with this sort of information is kind of difficult to get out there, especially when we're interacting with common law resource groups and the Know Your Rights groups. They tend to push that element aside, and I find that rather frustrating.
Very left brain, very left brain.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
Getting them into a spiritual space where they'll accept this kind of thing needs a lot of careful framing.
Yeah, they tend to think of the spiritual process and conversations with God as airy-fairy. However, the spiritual information tells us that this universe, according to the disappearance of the universe, is it's actually a murderous thought system. It's a predatory universe, and the more we can become aware of that, the more we can transform it in our lives so that it doesn't apply, and we get to the point of enlightenment where we might decide one day we're not going to bother to incarnate in this realm anymore. It's been fun, but there's better things to do.
Well, the thing is that in this particular run through, the chief aim of the enlightened is to realize consciousness outside of time.
Yeah.
And so once you do that, you can run it in as many times as you want.
That's right. You get to the point where you into mastery, where nothing and no one can control you because you've become a magical being, basically.
So that's what we're going for. That's what we're trying to teach people how to do, is get in touch with that.
Yeah.
To get in touch with the fifth dimensional being and start to see time as a tool rather than as a reality. Yeah, you become a master of time rather than a slave to it. Yeah. So if I go to page 16, the sponsoring thought behind the thought is either love or fear. The fear manifests because of we think that life is in doubt, but it's not. Declaring I love you produces energy that may not reflect back, or we worry about losing this. Pledging highest love greets greater fear. How about that? So if you say that, I understand what that means. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think I might be able to explain it. What it means is if you say to somebody that you might be close to, I love you, I love you, they may not be of the same frame of mind, and they may reject you simply because you're saying, I love you, I love you. Well, what are you trying to do? You're trying to tie me down. Are you interfering with my freedom? I'm not. I don't think I'm explaining it fully.
I think what you're trying to say is if you reach the height of that emotion and try to project that onto somebody else who's not ready for it, it might slap you in the face.
That's right. Yeah, you could actually get a very violent reaction back, right? And what I put forward as love is to set somebody free. You know, if you love somebody, set them free so you don't have any clutches on them, right? That doesn't mean they're going to go off and do things behind your back or do something nasty. It actually might set up a relationship where you set each other free, and that's the ultimate experience. You set each other free, but you know that you have complete trust in the other, and if one out of those two parties decides to move on to other realms, that's okay too, because you've set them free and you're not trying to trap them into something.
Yeah,
I don't know if I've explained that very well.
If I can, well, I mean, I have such a relationship, fortunately.
Yeah.
And basically what it comes down is I can say anything to my wife, and I can mean it with all my heart, and I have no expectations of response.
Yeah, I've actually had this conversation with my own missus, and I think I set her free about 20 years ago. That was my declaration. You're free to do what you please, right? You're free to go and raid the bank account and do what you like with it. But she doesn't, because she also set me free and doesn't. And so we collaborate when we do something with that material stuff, you know, because we trust each other.
Yeah, I never look, and I have no idea how much money is in there, and I never look.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Page 17. Parents teach that love is conditional, so we forget our magnificence at birth. Yeah, I'd go along with that idea. Conditional love is what causes pretty much all the problems, and it causes us to forget our magnificence at birth. We project the role of parent onto God as judgmental, fearful, and vengeful. Fear-based love dominates. Fear harms, whereas love heals. And free choice is selecting one or the other, fear or love. Yeah, there might be an expectation from our parents to be their highest model of how you should be, and that's not freedom. That's not even love, as far as I'm concerned. It's control. It's wanting you to take a profession which you don't really want to do, and that could set up all sorts of negative emotions. And that's what it calls fear-based love.
It's interesting. I was going to. Is my microphone on? Yeah.
Yes.
Just a couple of things. When you're talking before about living the life that that's sort of true existence or being is magical before. I remember years ago when I was reading Seth Material work, and he said that there was a process which was that you just oh,
Keep going.
is that all right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Where you don't sleep, you break your sleep up so that you sleep for 2 or 3 hours in the evening at night, and you also have an hour nap or something like that during the day. And what happens is that your life, it's like your daytime becomes more like a dream. And your dream becomes more like waking reality.
Yeah.
And my experience at the time of that was there was this sense of magic or this whole other sort of quality and texture to existence, which reminds me, reminded me of that when you were talking about that. But the other thing, it's interesting with choice and freedom. I remember, and I remember years ago, I also read Krishnamurti used to say that when you're truly free, you don't need a choice. There's only one thing that's appropriate to do for yourself at any one time or whatever, if you're actually truly free. So I find that quite interesting too.
That's why the metaphor of the Matrix is so powerful, because the problem is choice. And so once the system can't control someone who has choice, but someone who has choice realizes they don't need it.
Yeah.
That's freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, the Seth Material is pretty powerful and pretty up there. Yeah.
It was quite popular at one stage. That was back in the 70s.
That's right, 70s and 80s, yeah. Next statement, survival of the fittest is fear choice. And what that's referring to is that the idea of having to compete with each other to exist is one based on fear.
Yeah.
Whereas the love choice will acknowledge that there is enough for everyone and we don't have to compete with each other. Survival of the fittest is an implementation of being bigger and better than anyone else. And so, those not at that realm, we can do away with. They're the weaker ones of the species. Let's get rid of them. And that's not who we are.
Well, essentially what we're talking about here is natural selection. And the whole idea of natural selection suggests that nature is a machine.
Mm-hmm.
That there's no.
Sorry, there was a bit of a distortion there for me. What was that last thing you said, Chris?
The presupposition of natural selection is that nature is a machine. And that there's no spirit.
Yep.
And no free will. So
yep.
Immediately you're coming into you coming into direct conflict with the spiritual realm, so to speak.
Yeah, in book 4, it goes much deeper into that subject. And it says that our true nature is not survival of the fittest. Our true nature, how did it put it? Well, what it was saying is that if there's a baby trapped in a burning building, we will run into that building to rescue that baby, even though it puts us in danger. If we were survival of the fittest, we wouldn't bother doing that. Just let it burn. We could get hurt. And so our true nature is one of love and supporting each other rather than survival of the fittest.
I've got a quote here which fits this subject matter just very quickly. No machine starts from small beginnings, grows, forms new structures within itself, and reproduces itself. Yet plants and animals do this all the time. They can also regenerate after damage. To see them as machines propelled only by ordinary physics and chemistry is an act of faith. To insist they are machines, despite all appearances, is dogmatic.
What's that last word?
Dogmatic.
God matters.
Dogmatic.
Dogmatic. Oh, okay, yeah, got it.
So that's from Rupert Sheldrake's Science Delusion, and that pertains to this particular subject matter, which is the nature of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
I remember too, there's this wonderful story that I was told years ago where there, and this is a true story, the couple of a person experienced it themselves. There were a colony of rats, and there was one rat that was blind, and another rat would sort of be like a guide dog, where they'd have a piece of straw and they'd both bite on the straw, and one would guide the other one around that was blind. And it was, so that's quite amazing, really. Anyway,
we're seeing quite a lot more of that lately. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've seen a lot of memes and gifs lately of animals looking after other animals that would naturally be predators, and it's just quite extraordinary.
Yep.
It's the whole energy.
Mm.
Okay. All right, we'll just do a few more.
Yep.
And this one's an important one. We often think that life is a school to learn lessons. But what the book says is life is a process of creation, not discovery. Not a school to learn lessons, but to recreate experientially what we already know conceptually.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so what it's telling us is we are here as creators, all of us. We don't have to discover anything because it's all within us anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, we're not here to learn. We're here to remember.
That's right. Yeah, and it splits up the word remember and calls it remember, to be part of the wholeness of God, if you want to put it that way.
Mm.
Yeah. And that follows with knowing is not enough. The soul seeks to experience. In other words, when we incarnate here, we're doing it for the experience. Because when we're in the absolute, we can't experience ourselves as a creator. We already know it. Right? We're already in absolute bliss. But you can't experience anything. And corresponding with that is from other material. It actually, even from the yoga material, it says that when you're in bliss all the time for eternity, you start getting bored. And so that's why you choose to have to be born into duality, so you can have experience. And it's like an adventure park. Right? You go.
We've got you to run the park for us, George.
Yeah. when you don't know the rules, it can be bloody damn difficult.
Yeah.
Or if you're going out there and using your God-given power and you're hurting others, or you're taking from others, then the universe will come back at you and give you that experience in return. And it'll keep happening until you change your ways. That's just the way it's programmed. That's the way it's set up. And in that context, then the disappearance of the universe is correct. It's a hellish place to be in, but it doesn't have to be. Once you start learning the rules, you can come out of that, and it becomes a lot more fun, let's call it.
Yep.
Yeah. on this next one, it talks about the definition of God. In the Eastern thought, God is unseen, it's mystical, and is not. In the Western thought, God is seen. It's everything that we see. It's practical. It's all that is. And it says neither is wrong and neither is right. It's actually both of these descriptions. In the moment fear existed, love could exist as anything to be experienced. So in order to experience love, at some stage, you might experience fear, so that you've got a point of reference. If you don't have that point of reference, then you don't experience love. You know, you're in bliss all the time, but you don't experience the polarity. In order to know the polarity, you have to know its opposite, right? I mean, one of the examples it uses is that if everybody was tall, you wouldn't know yourself as tall because everybody's the same height, right? If there's some people that are short and you've got some people that's tall, then you can differentiate between short and tall, and it's the same for everything in the realm of duality. You know, cold versus hot, up versus down. And there's also the space in between, by the way. And so that's what the material duality does for us. It gives us a reference point where you can experience love by, first of all, experiencing fear. Yeah. Make sense?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
you need to both poles to understand. You need
Yeah,
to
that's right.
have both ends to understand all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And paradox too. I mean, there's sort of the issue of paradox where something, it's not good and bad, it's sort of good bad.
Yes.
That, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It actually talks about that. It's where two opposing views can actually both be correct.
Mm.
They can be actually totally opposite, and yet both of them have got validity.
Yeah.
That's known as a divine dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that points to abraxas, doesn't it? That's the Gnostics' abraxas. That's the view from above both poles.
Okay.
You not heard that one?
I haven't heard that, but I'm trying to think of a particular example where you've got two opposing truths existing simultaneously. Oh yeah, well, it could be as simple as say you have two people in exactly the same circumstances. You know, they both got access to some sort of abundance, about the same. You know, let's say they're about the same level, and one of those people can be happy about it, their circumstances, and the other one can be absolutely miserable, right? And yet they're in the same circumstance. So that's an opposing point of view. One is ecstatic that they've got a few dollars in the bank, and the other one's miserable because they're not a millionaire. So you've got two opposing truths there. You know, one is saying, well, I've got plenty of abundance. It doesn't necessarily equate with dollars. The other one's saying, well, I don't have enough, and they'll be miserable about it.
It's possibly an easier one to describe the point, and that is hot and cold.
Yeah, it's a judgment.
Well, I mean, the hot and cold are the same thing, only differing by degree, literally in this case, by measurement. And so you could say that two people regarding the same line could have two different descriptions.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can train yourself to be almost immune to cold to some extent.
Yeah.
And then you've got the stories of the yogis that can drink mercury and doesn't affect them at all, and that goes a little bit deeper, of course.
Well, I mean, the description for that is, I mean, the reason for that is fairly simple, actually. But, you know, it wouldn't be simple to someone living in a materialist reality.
Okay. Yeah.
I won't dig, but
Okay, so page 26 says God's purpose for us is that we know and experience ourselves as God by first knowing the opposite, deliberately forgetting our true nature. And that's what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
You forget your true nature, and so you separate yourself from God, even though that's an illusion, so that you can have the experience as you get more and more evolved, that you can actually manifest things. You can manifest your reality if you know what you're doing. And that generally won't happen in your first lifetime if you come back to the realm of incarnation, the physical reality. It can take hundreds of lifetimes to learn those skills. And in the meantime, you might end up with your own soul family. You might end up in pretty dramatic circumstances. You might be killing each other, you know, in the battlefield or something like that. And what that does is give you experience and tells you, well, that was pretty unpleasant. I'm not going to do that next lifetime. I've learned from that. I'm sure there's a better way to do things. And eventually you get to the point where you get enlightened and get to the point where you decide, well, I've explored this realm up and down, left and right, in and out, and I'm going to get out of here. I'm not going to come back here anymore. It can be rather unpleasant after all. And you might actually choose, as an enlightened being, to come back and incarnate in physical reality in order to help others get out of their delusions. You know, so you can actually incarnate as a mission rather than for your own enlightenment. That might go to the next point on page 28. It says, our job on earth is not to learn as we already know, it's all within us, but to remember who we are and to remember who everyone else is, to remind them so that they remember also. And it calls that our soul, our one and only soul purpose, and it also calls that our soul's only purpose. Right? So all the beings that we encounter, right, even if they're abusing us, are actually reminding us who we are in a very subtle way. And everyone's only purpose is to remind each other until we all can ascend to some level. And from what I can tell, that can happen on a worldly scale, on a global scale. In other words, the entire human family can awaken to the point where we all vibrate to a higher dimension. It doesn't have to be just parts of the population. It can actually telepathically sweep through the population. If we do make choices though, which doesn't take us down that track, let's say we're getting obsessed with technology, and the technology becomes the religion, then we could be actually ending up getting controlled by machines. And that's actually happening on this planet right now. So that's one of the dangers that we can encounter when we go through this phase of awakening. It may not wake us up straight away, and it could mean that we're going to have a pretty unpleasant journey could last hundreds or even thousands of years. It's kind of a back step. The more recent material tells us that we're supposed to have a balance between technology and cosmology, and at the moment, the technology is outstripping the spirituality big time, and that's not a happy situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it's interesting when I talk to people, and I was just reminded, George, when you're saying that about Steiner saying the electrification of the planet is really impinging on our capacity to be cognizant or know ourselves as a spiritual entity, you know, as a spiritual being.
Yeah.
And I find it's interesting when I talk to people, after being part of that fluoride night with Solutions Empowerment and sort of Mark sort of leading it in a way, and saying, and also the Children's Health Defence is running a court case at the moment about fluoride in America, and the fact that apparently it sort of reduces our IQ or intellectual or mental capacity by 15 points. And you know, there's a way in which I've got to shift how I'm relating to people, and to somehow, you know, wondering how much fluoride has affected my brain, because he was saying, you know, I mean, I haven't been drinking anything with fluoride in it for decades, but apparently you absorb it through your skin when you have a shower. So,
Boron.
What was that?
Boron.
Boron, yes, I've just started to take it, actually, yes. Susan put me on board.
Yeah, we're actually lucky because, well, call it luck or whatever. Our home is in, it's close to Mount Dandenong, and we're on tank water.
Yep.
We're very happy about that.
I bet.
Yeah, we've had, at the moment we're using rain water off the roof because it's not too bad.
Yeah.
But for close to 30 years, we had water that was pumped up from the creek, and the creek is pristine.
Uh-huh.
There's even small crayfish in that in those creeks.
Oh, great.
Yeah, they're painted. They're blue crayfish. You know, some of them get quite large if you're lucky enough to see one. And that tells you that the waterway is quite healthy.
Yeah, frogs are the other one.
Yeah,
Yes.
we don't come across frogs where we are, but we've seen the crayfish a number of times.
Yeah, well, they're both indicators of a healthy ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. All right, so we went through the sole purpose, and on page 30, it's talking about evolution. Evolution is knowing all is one. And all is one, experiencing all is one, and being all is one. And that's known as the triune, the holy trinity. And what it's saying is the physical reality that we live, material reality, duality, is actually a triune system. In other words, if you interpret what I've written here, it's Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, or it can be interpreted as mind, body, and spirit, or it can be before, now, and after. And as far as creation goes, it can be described as thought, word, and deed, right? And The thought, word, and deed is an interesting one. It says that thought, word, and deed are the three tools of creation. And if you want to create something, you have to you have to use all three elements. And it's easy to explain. You know, if you're only thought to try and create, then you're just a dreamer. You don't actually create anything. Or if you try and if you only implement deed without thought, without vision, you end up being very busy, but you don't actually get anywhere. You don't actually create anything. The word part of it usually refers to collective energy, right? So the power of multiple beings working together is far more powerful than a single being. And sometimes it's expressed as passion, that central element, but you also need that as well. You know, if you're going to create something, it usually takes multiple beings to do that very effectively. I hope that makes sense. And maybe we'll do just one more before we call it a night. What do you reckon?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And this one's very important. God does not will worldwide calamities, but merely observes us doing so. We are therefore not victims, only creators. Now, the reason why that is so important, the way I see it, for the law groups, let's say, is if you see yourself as a victim, you're actually creating that situation for yourself, right? The calamities that occur both on the personal level, minuscule level, and the worldwide level is our own creations. You know, obviously the worldwide ones are a collective creation. And from other sources of material I've shared before that if we talk about governments being corrupt, if governments are corrupt to the core, it's because the people themselves are corrupt, and if they were to deal with their corruption, they would no longer attract that corrupt government. And we're seeing we're seeing corrupt governments all over the world. You know, we can look at the way it's set up in Australia. We're seeing how corrupt it all is. And it's because of we've attracted that on a collective scale. You know, the elements of greed and have been dominating our lives for quite a long time.
Yep.
And we've got to recognise that in ourselves. The material actually goes into a lot of detail to explain that, and it's actually in the next item. Let me go to that one. It says, calling things bad is calling ourselves bad as we created and chose them. Rather than accept this label, we disown our own creations. And this intellectual and spiritual dishonesty allows us to accept a world without personal responsibility, disempowering ourselves to do anything about it. When I've shared that sort of information with certain people, they get really angry at me. Because what I'm saying to them, and I do it in a kind, compassionate way, you know, when they complain about something that's in their lives that's really stirring up the pot, and I say, well, have you considered why are you attracting this and therefore creating it? You know, maybe it's trying to tell you to take personal responsibility. And that's when they get angry and they say, oh, I didn't create that. It's them. It's they. You know, they put the blame outside themselves.
Denial is the first step.
Yeah, but it's a very sore point with somebody or with some people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so not everyone's going to be attracted to this sort of information because they see that the bad things that are happening in the world is because of them, and it's nothing to do with me. But the mere fact that it's in your life means you've actually helped to create it, or you've chosen to experience the outcome of that negative creation. Yeah, that's a good place to finish for tonight, I think.
Taking personal responsibility. Yep.
Yeah.
George, can I just ask you, that next one where it says you cannot change the collectively created outer alone, that for me, that might round off what we've just, in terms of grounding it a bit. Would that be possible just to do that one more line?
Okay, well, let me read it. You cannot change the collectively created outer event alone. So you must change the inner experience of these instead. Remove judgments of what is observed and pain disappears. Yeah, that makes sense to me. What it's saying is the choice of the collective is the one that dominates our lives, right? And if most people, the vast majority of people, are choosing the technocratic society to be dominated by machines, then we may also get dominated by those machines, even though we don't agree with that situation. And so what you can do is you can remove the judgment of what you observe. You know, if a machine is controlling you, then remove the judgment of that, and you may not necessarily attract it into your life anymore. And you might find, even if it's in your life, you don't feel the pain of that.
Unplugging from the matrix.
Unplugging from the matrix. Yeah, you're either still controlled by that, but it doesn't bother you, or you might find that you're actually shifted out of that realm into a more pleasant realm, which can deal with that. Yeah, so that's some of the more powerful stuff.
And quickly, is that all disappearance of the universe stuff? That's not conversations with God at all?
No, that's the what we've shared most of tonight is conversations with God.
I was going to say, because that's basically from conversations with God. I recognise it. Yeah.
The disappearance of the universe, chapter 1, puts the universe in a very negative way, as we saw.
I see the split screen now.
It said things like, you don't need us to help you feel good about a universe that was never worth the price of admission and never will be. That seems to be a very negative connotation of our existence here. And
I'd say so.
It's a good observation, though. You know, what the difference is the conversation with God material. It does tell us that it's coming directly from the divine. However, don't necessarily believe that. You have to test it out for yourself. Whereas Disappearance of the Universe, coming from Course in Miracles, the Course in Miracles itself was actually dictated by the figure we know of as Jesus Christ, right? And what Jesus Christ was attempting to do was to correct the record, right? Because people have misinterpreted the message of the Bible, right? And in other material, Jesus Christ, was Christed, but he was also a human being who had faults like we did, right? So in one of the Conversations with God books, it actually says, well, who said Jesus was perfect? And that made me laugh, actually.
You got angry, didn't you?
Yeah. Of course, that won't sit very well with some of the religions, because they say you can only get to God through Jesus Christ. And I'm not sure. The information that I'm seeing with these new revelations is saying that we can all be Christed, right?
Yeah.
We're coming into a time when that is highly recommended. And when enough of us are Christed, and it only needs to be a small percentage of the population, it doesn't have to be 50%, then that can actually influence the whole population and can sweep through telepathically. And so the whole population can then ascend. And the result of that might be that we go into a higher dimension where none of us bother with third dimensional concepts anymore. We don't need to.
That's the plan. There is actually, I just thought I'd mention it now that you bring that up. On the 21st of December.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know about Uluru?
I saw that. Yeah, go on.
So, well, I was going to suggest that we plug a mass consciousness event into that time frame.
Yeah, well, for the last couple of years, we've participated and publicised a world earth healing meditation. A lady in Gippsland actually organised it, and she's come here for the last couple of years, and she's done it here. She actually has about 400 groups. Last time she had about 400 groups worldwide, all meditating at the same time.
Fantastic.
Right? Now, if we can accept that metaphysics has relevance in our lives, then that's a very positive thing to do. I've been disappointed by the numbers that we've had here, but she was quite happy about it. I'd like to get a full room.
We need to get over 100,000 people worldwide for that event.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's being achieved through all these hundreds of groups worldwide, and I wouldn't mind a few more at Magpie House.
I'll be there. If we're not going to get arrested en masse, I'll be there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe that'll be our goal.
To get arrested en masse.
A friend sent me a video actually of the September the 5th. I was just saying, George, a friend sent me some video clips of people filming on the September the 5th protests. Okay. And there were thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people involved. Okay. I had no idea. The media said it was a couple of hundred throughout Australia.
There were people everywhere.
It was huge.
It was.
Right.
I had no idea.
Queensland was enormous.
Yeah. Okay. And they're all saying pre-Victoria, which is nice.
Say again?
Yeah.
So it was a success.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so let's
we'll keep going down our path, and I'll have to. Hey, Chris, maybe you could bombard Thoran somehow and say, well, why haven't you passed on this information to Daryl yet? Because this is frustrating to us. We need to keep this thing moving. Doug's got some really powerful information. If you can get that sent over,
I'll give Thorin a shove.
Okay, cool.
You'll love that.
All right.
I've got a couple other things to talk to him about, so I will give him a shove. No worries.
All right, I've got to go.
Okay, mate.
So thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you for everyone for attending, and thank you, Clara. And let's call it a night. Namaste.
Yep.
The next time.
Namaste. Bye.